Hey guys, Shecky here with another knife review slash knife showdown. I've previously reviewed this Benchmade 710, gave it very high marks. You can look back at that video. I'll put a link on this video to that video if you want to see the in-depth review on this one. But today I wanted to kind of compare it to this knife. Most of you are familiar with this knife. This is the Cold Steel Black Rhino. Quite a formidable knife. I've got lots of fingerprints on it, sorry, but just take a look at that blade. Don't have a good word for it other than just sexy. Just a pretty blade. Take a look at those. That got a little something there, but take a look at that handle, and I'm going to kind of compare it to that blade right there. So let's talk a couple points here and see what we find out. To begin with, the reason I'm comparing these two knives is because I feel like they have a similar purpose, and that is primarily a defensive blade with I'd say a pretty easy rollover into a defensive, a large EDC. I know a lot of folks don't like large blades for EDC. I am not in that camp. I fall more into the camp that says that a small blade can't do a large blade's job, but a large blade can do a small blade's job. And I like these blades. If you're comfortable choking up, you can pretty much do anything, and it's just like anything else. If you train with these, if you practice fine cutting with a larger blade, you'll be good at it, or you'll be adequate at it, and you'll also have a larger blade if the need arises. Quick blade size comparison, that's really the dimension that I'm most concerned with. This, the Black Rhino is a hair over 4 inches. I measured it just at 4 1/16 inch. The McHenry Williams 710 just a hair under, which is, I measure it like 3 15/16. I mean, it's just a hair under 4 inches. So to the naked eye, lengthwise, it's really hard to see a difference in the length. They're just that similar. And again, that's another reason why I wanted to put these together and kind of have a shootout. Weight is where our paths kind of diverge, and I'll make some observations on this one in a second, but this one I show at 4 5/8 ounces, and as big as this knife is, this knife to me disappears in your pocket. If you've got an adequate pocket, this knife just absolutely disappears, and I love to carry this knife. This knife, on the other hand, is one of those knives that I feel in my pocket. When I carry it around, I feel, a lot of weight. I feel like, my shorts are being pulled to, one side, or my pants are kind of, riding to one side because this is in that pocket. So this knife, I don't know if I said, but this knife is right at 7 ounces, and for me, that's just too heavy. I haven't really tried this in my back pocket much. I do occasionally carry my defensive knife in my back pocket, if I want to keep my front pockets kind of clear. But, to me, it's just too heavy. Price, it's kind of hard to say. Both of these knives can be found like on eBay, but neither of them are readily available from retail spots. I think I actually got this knife for, I think it was like $65 directly from Cold Steel. One of the few times I've ever bought directly from a manufacturer, and I did that because it was so cheap. I think it was $65 with shipping. Great price. Generally speaking, you're going to pay about $100 for this knife these days. This knife, a little bit more, generally speaking, $125. I got this used off Craigslist, so it's not a good model. I think I got it for $75, but generally speaking, you'll pay about $120 to $140 for this knife. A lot of that has to do with blade steel, and we'll get to that right now. Blade material, This is an AUS-8. To me, AUS-8 is a good steel, but it is the minimum steel that I feel comfortable with on a regular use. Now, if I've got a knife that I'm keeping in my pocket and its only job is to save my life, it almost doesn't matter what it's made of. As long as I can get a good edge on it, I'm not going to use it every day. I'm not going to use it except to save my life, and hopefully that'll never happen. So what it's made of is really not that important, but if I am going to roll it into a large EDC and I'm going to use it every day, AUS-8 is the minimum that I'm going to have. Anything softer, anything that doesn't hold an edge as well as AUS-8, to me, is just not worth having. It's too much work for what it is. And that's just my opinion. This guy has a whole other set of advantages and disadvantages, and this is where you get primarily the price differentiation. This 710 comes in D2. There's a high-end model, the D2, the 710-01, I think it comes in S30V or something like that, something a lot more expensive, but generally speaking, you'll find that knife for around $600 on eBay. It's one of the gold class Benchmades, so it's mostly a collector, but as far as use, regular usage, this is D2 steel. Let me see. Let me get you up in there so you can see. Maybe? Come on. D2 steel right there. You can see the D2. We didn't really give you an up-close sexy look of this one, but there's the McHenry Williams. And just talking about D2 steel, here's the 710 right there at the bottom of the Benchmade logo. D2 steel is great. It's tough. It holds an edge real well. It gets a relatively fine edge. The problem that you're going to have with it is that it does rust. And I don't know if I've done a great job cleaning it up, but let me see if I can get to it. There's a bit of surface rust right there. I've done some basic cleanup on it. I need to kind of wipe it out, but it does rust, and that's just kind of riding in my pocket and in my my safe. So that is something to be aware of. But you know, it's just like anything else. Really, any kind of metal will rust under the right circumstances. Although Color Lever might disagree with that with the salt that he tried to rust out and did pretty well. Let's see, blade shape. By definition, they're both modified clip points. You might want to say this is some kind of, you know, severely modified, because you can see it's got a huge belly and a big high peak here. So it's heavily modified for what it is. But they're both considered modified. As far as handle material goes, we start seeing a lot of divergence. I believe a lot of the choices cold steel made here are for appearance. Not bad, but they're for coolness, cool factor. You have this polished micarta, which is just absolutely, I don't think you're going to get a feel for it, but it's absolutely beautiful. Let me see. Look at that. Yeah, there you go. It's just a really, really pretty material polished up like that. The downside to polishing it like that is it's just slick as glass. Every part of the handle on this thing is just slick as it can be. You do have kind of a finger groove here at the top, but it is rounded. And for our friend Nut and Fancy, no jimping. So you do have to kind of, if this is going to be a defensive blade, you may want to put something on the top. You know, modify this top a little bit to give you, and maybe even the bottom somewhat, to give you some extra grip. It is a lockback, and we'll talk about that more in a bit. But you don't have any kind of flow through. It's just a single billet. It's not single billet. It's actually sandwiched billets together. 3 pieces of stainless steel make up the handle, and it's beautiful. It's fun to look at for sure. On the other hand, here you have a G10 with 410 stainless steel liners that are skeletonized. See if we can get in there. Yep, you can see those skeletonized holes. So really lightens up the weight. Has a lot to do with how we can have a knife that's this long, that's got stainless steel liners, but still weighs well under 5 ounces. It does have a spacer in the back, and but has good rounded edges, and we'll talk about that right now. As far as ergonomics goes, I feel like the Black Rhino does have some sharp edges, primarily when you grip, when your hand kind of falls onto the lock. The edges of this lock material are pretty sharp, and up here, this is pretty sharp as well. These shoulders right here are kind of sharp. If I was using it for a long term, that might be a concern. If I was just kind of doing something, opening up a box, putting it away, wouldn't really bother me that much. But just so you do know, the lock itself is pretty sharp. These edges are moderately sharp, and that's just something to think about. 710, again, fits very well in the hand. Something I didn't say about this. As far as the grip goes, I have medium-sized hands. This knife, it would be ideal for somebody with larger hands, but overall, it's a comfortable blade even in my hand as a medium-sized hand person. This knife, I feel like, because there's not quite as much sculpting as far as the design goes, I think it's more universal. It does have some moderately functional jimping up here. You can see that, as well as down here, and you can lock into that. I tend, when I hold a knife for defensive purposes, to kind of heel it, giving you a little extra reach and giving you a little more support stabbing. But the G10 is, on this one, again, this is a used blade, so it's hard to say, but it's pretty worn. It's pretty rounded. You can definitely feel the texture. There's some degree of traction on it, but for the most part, it's not terribly good as far as grip goes. I would say you rely primarily on the geometry of the ramps on the top and bottom, as well as the recessed jimping at the top and the bottom. Clips, you can see both of those here. This is a little bit thin of a clip for this big of a knife, and that may lend itself to why it rides kind of funny in my pocket. But it's reasonably strong. It does a fine job. The only downside is if you do like a deeper carry, you don't get it here, because where my thumb is about where the top of your pants are. So all this sticks up above, outside of your pocket. A lot of people talk about that catching on things and flipping out of your pocket, and I could see where that would happen. My biggest complaint is that's just not comfortable. Having this, kind of digging into you as you're walking around. I'm not a big fan of that. As opposed to the McHenry Williams, which rides significantly deeper in your pocket, about there. Only about that much sticks out. Good, thick, typical Benchmade pocket clip. I mentioned this in the review of this knife. I don't like how ugly this clip gets. I know I need to send it back to Benchmade and get their other clip, but just haven't done it. But as it comes, this pocket clip wears heavily and isn't very attractive when it does, and I think it takes away from the overall aesthetics of the knife. Deployment action, you saw at the beginning, this knife is a bear to deploy. I'd say it's slow to medium deployment with wrist action. You definitely need to put some wrist action on it to get it to go. I just can't do it without the wrist. That was pretty close, but still no cigar. Try one more time. That was wrist. So I don't feel like I can deploy this without wrist. It's slow when you do, but it does have a nice snap up, and definitely is there. This dude, I can't say enough about Axis Lock. To me, they're just genius. The Axis Lock is just absolutely dead fast. I can deploy it with no wrist, and it's very easy to put it back in and just get about your day. So definitely the Axis Lock is my favorite lock overall, not eclipsed by anything. But let's talk specifically about the locks. This, you may say, well, yeah, this is a slower deploying knife, but that's because it's got the super strong triad lock. And from what I heard and what I've seen, the tests do indicate a lot of strength on the downward strength on this blade. In other words, you can put a lot of weight here and this blade will not fail. My concern about the triad, and I'd love to see somebody with a lot of money test this out, if you look in here, you see how much metal has to be removed from the blade. Normally on a typical blade, this would go straight and round out, and you'd have your hole there for it, and it would work like a champ. But this, because of the way they work the axis lock, they have to cut all that out. So I'm wondering how much, I guess I call it lateral strength, this knife has. Now, it's not flexing if it looks like that in the video. It's not flexing at all, but I'd wonder how much sideward strength it has compared to a typical one, because all of that metal is missing. But as I say, that is a dimension which can be tested in the right circumstances, and I'd want to know that the knife, whether or not the knife would excel in that way as it does with the downward pressure. The side to side, I'm really kind of curious as to whether or not it would hold up. As far as the lock goes here, I know there's some videos on YouTube and elsewhere claiming that the axis lock has some weaknesses, and I understand, that's something some people believe. I do not. The physics of it simply makes sense to me. Basically, what you have is a flat piece in here, and that flat piece rotates up against, and you see you have much less removal of material here compared to the amount of material removed here. You see, that's a huge chunk of metal that they removed here compared to the Benchmade. But that small flat piece right in there basically rotates until it surpasses the axis bead or whatever you call that, and that snaps over that flat piece, and boom, you're locked in. And this knife has zero movement any direction. I had this a little loose for a while, but I've corrected that, and I can say that this knife right now has absolutely no blade play. Finally, fit and finish. Beginning with Black Rhino, one word, it's flawless. There's no issues where anything overruns anything else. Everything matches up perfectly. It's beautiful. I love the way these are actually reset into the bolsters. Just beautiful. I like the way they've used smaller screws on here to kind of leave a large plane of black polished micarta. It's just a beautiful knife. This knife is a little bit more of a workman knife, and it has that feel to it. It's very simple, it's very understated, but it does have kind of a lesser grandiose feel to it compared to the Black Rhino. So that's my comparison. I hope there was something useful here for you. Again, as always, if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment or shoot me an email, and whichever one of these you pick, I believe you'll be happy with it, and either one of them will help you have fun out there.